Sports, a bridge that brings people together. And here in the Commonwealth, it's no different. From the gridiron to the hardwood and beyond, we all have a team we love to talk about. Now for the teams you care about, here's Heartland Sports Live with Trevor Rice.
And welcome into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio 1400 AM, and we are live streaming this afternoon with ESPN Radio 1061.com. Currently, I'm the only one in the building, but I feel like I have extra company. I feel like you're right here next to me. Barry Abrams joining me right now. We're going to talk some Kentucky Derby action. Of course, that date adjusted. Barry Abrams, the host and producer of the In the Gate podcast. It's been a while since we've spoken to you, Barry. I want to thank you for your time and coming on the show.
I hope you guys are doing okay.
Yeah, we're doing all right, I guess. We're making it through. Definitely tough times for everybody. ESPN, us here at 106.1 ESPN Radio here in E-Town and such, but we will get through this thing, and it'll make us all stronger at the end, is what I'd like to think.
We're all in it together. If you didn't get it before that, you hopefully will get it now.
You are certainly correct in that. And one of the biggest headlines, Barry, here recently, of course, the CDC has been giving timetables on when things should be shut down, when we should avoid making contact or getting in large groups of people, and it pretty much extended into the original Kentucky Derby date there in early May, and so now they have announced that the Kentucky Derby will take place later this year, Saturday, September 5th. Does that impact anything at all?
Absolutely. I mean, remember, there were a bunch of horses who had a lot of talent, but because of niggling injuries or whatnot, were considered off the Derby trail. Well, now, with 4 extra months, in theory, to heal and improve, these horses are back in consideration, including Maxfield, who won the Breeders' Futurity last October at Keeneland in Kentucky, Lexington, and had some injuries. The trainer was going to give him some time off. Well, now he has a chance. And the same, I think you could say, of a horse like Gouverneur Morris for Todd Pletcher, who had a very tight path to get to the Derby. Everything had to go right. Now he has some more opportunity to improve, to get bigger, and if he misses in one Derby prep, and there will be races added to the Derby prep schedule between now and September that obviously wouldn't have been otherwise. If he misses in one, he has a chance at another. So there are another horse named Mr. Monomoy, who was way off the Derby trail, had minor injuries or illnesses, wasn't even a consideration. Now he's going to get back in training. So the competition is definitely going to get stronger when we get to the real Kentucky Derby that hopefully will be run.
Does that impact anything? Concerning the time of year, it might. I'm guessing it might be a little more humid. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but does the weather impact things? Obviously, the rain during May, which we've seen a lot of that here in Kentucky in recent history. But do we expect any changes there?
Well, not so much with the weather, but remember, if you've had cats or dogs as pets, you know that cat and dog years are not the same as human years. And the same is true with horses, and they age pretty quickly. When you are in the spring of your 3-year-old year for a racehorse, that's essentially like being a teenager, being maybe 13 or 14. By the time you get to the fall, these horses are now expected to race against older horses. Remember, the Derby is open to only 3-year-olds. But normally, under normal circumstances in the fall, you're supposed to race against your elders because you're now essentially a 20-year-old kid. Big difference there. You wouldn't put a middle schooler into the NFL. So, yeah, these horses are going to be bigger and stronger, the ones that actually go to the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby, and that should make it a better race. And there has never been a horse in all 145 runnings of the Derby that has beaten Secretariat's 1 minute 59 and 2/5 seconds in that race. Now that it's being run in September, there's a chance that could happen.
Barry Abrams joining us right now on Heartland Sports Live. He is the host and producer of the In the Gate podcast. Go and check that out. At B Abrams Voice on Twitter as well. Give him a follow. As we're talking Kentucky Derby and just horse racing in general, how it's being impacted due to COVID-19. And, of course, there has been races still been going on. But what does the horse racing industry look like in the months to come, Barry?
Well, the interesting thing is, I mean, there have been some meets that were shut down because somebody at that track tested positive, Aqueduct in New York being one of them. But there have been tracks that have still been racing, Santa Anita in California, Oaklawn Park in Arkansas, and Louisiana, where the Louisiana Derby was just run this past Saturday. Well, here's the thing. Now that the Louisiana meet is done, where are those people going to be allowed to go? Will they be allowed to go to Kentucky as they would have? There's no Keeneland meet in April. That was canceled. So where will they even be allowed in? Does everybody have to be tested? Will they let people come in from other places? That is about to be answered. Nobody really knows the answer to that question. So racing in Santa Anita will continue. They basically run through the beginning of July for all intents and purposes. Will New York start back up after a thorough scrubbing? We don't know. Gulfstream Park had somebody exposed to the virus, not somebody test positive, but somebody exposed to it. So they canceled racing for one day last Friday, scrubbed the place down, came back and ran on Saturday, and they basically run straight through until August, really. So will the horsemen who were supposed to leave Gulfstream after next weekend and come up to Kentucky and then to New York, which is where the bigger money is as the year goes on, are they going to stay at Gulfstream and just keep running? Because there are races that are not worth as much, but races that they can run in. That is all to be determined. Nobody really knows yet.
Now, there is a lot of money when it comes to horse racing, and not only from the jockeys, but the owners of the horses and such, but also gambling, a big part of horse racing. How is that? How's the whole gambling scene looking?
The numbers have gone up in the last couple of weeks that are detailed in an article on ESPN.com written by my colleague Willie Weinbaum. Not dramatically, but they have gone up. Obviously, people are looking for a Jones of some kind, and some of them may be experimenting with racing when they might not otherwise have. Again, it's not dramatic, but there is certainly an uptick over the same weekends last year. And however long this goes on, you might get more people just kind of looking for something to do, and they might find this sport that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, you are seeing a lot of interest in a whole bunch of different things because there is no sports going on right now. In fact, I heard on Golic and Wingo this morning that just different things that were being spectated. For example, iRacing, a big deal over the weekend, and so many other things that are kind of being aired on ESPN these days just because there isn't any of that content to go by. I guess, Barry, my question for you is, what are you doing through all of this? Obviously, there's still a little bit of horse racing to monitor, but how has that impacted your world being, affiliated with ESPN, and how everybody's handling this?
Well, we still have some shows that are being done daily. SportsCenter is being done 3 times a day. Get Up is being done in Bristol. Our satellite offices have been shut down. New York, Charlotte, Los Angeles, and basically Washington, D.C. as well, where you'd have PTI and Around the Horn. Those have been shut down. But we have sent equipment out to about 75 or 90 of our talent, somewhere in that range, so that they can actually contribute to shows from their homes. First Take is being done that way with Molly, Stephen A., and Max from their respective homes, and a very skeleton staff in Bristol to integrate it through a control room. But yes, some stuff is actually being done. We don't let anything get in the way.
Barry Abrams joining us here on Heartland Sports Live, host and producer of the In the Gate podcast. Go and check that out. Barry, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Kentucky Derby here in recent history, whether it be the finishes of the race or the fact that some of these horses, we are finding out, maybe juiced up and things of that nature. do we see that being a trend continuing, or is the industry as a whole really starting to hammer down on things like that?
They had started years ago to crack down somewhat. They did away with the legality of anabolic steroids, which when I was a kid and young adult were still legal. And I remember going to Saratoga one time when a prominent owner in the business was giving a lecture outside the grandstand, and I raised my hand and said, "Why exactly are these legal?" And he basically told me to go away. Well, those things have been done away with, but obviously there is still drug usage in this sport, either drugs that some of us feel shouldn't be legal but are, and others that are not legal and are still used. And in that regard, it's no different from any other sport. Why do you think there has to be a governmental organization that controls the Olympics and doping, the World Anti-Doping Association? Because people want to win, and they'll do whatever it takes. This sport needs to do a better job of policing that. There's no question about that. One of the problems is racing is a very status quo business that needs a real swift kick in the you-know-what to get it going sometimes. And so the federal indictments that came down a couple of weeks ago of two very prominent trainers, one of whose horses, Maximum Security, crossed the line first in the Kentucky Derby last year before the disqualification. When those sorts of things happen, hopefully that is the critical mass that gets things going to where there is much more significant policing of the drugs and the administration of those drugs in this industry. That's what we hope.
Yeah, so I guess with all that being said, are there harsher penalties to come that maybe they're looking at to maybe help in preventing this even further?
Well, even before these indictments, several years ago, Rick Dutrow, who trained the 2008 Kentucky Derby and Preakness winner Big Brown, was cited for multiple drug offenses and was banned for 10 years. And while there are some who were saying he got too harsh a sentence, that is being held up as the test case, that if people are going to routinely flout the law and flout the rules and they get caught, this could happen to them. As a matter of fact, in the harness world, and we don't normally talk harness on our show, there was a trainer in New Jersey who just passed away from the coronavirus, Carmine Fusco, who was banned for 5 years for basically doing the same thing as Rick Dutrow did. So that's what we hope happens, that when the penalties are actually enforced and people are prohibited from doing their jobs, that people will shape up. But it's no different from any other sport. People want to win and hope that they can stay ahead of the police when it comes to cheating.
Barry Abrams, host and producer of the In the Gate podcast on Heartland Sports Live. One more question for you, Barry. When we get to September, if the race, looking ahead, does happen and the world kind of gets back to being normal for just a little bit here in the coming months, who are we looking at as maybe the top 2 or 3 horses going into this year's race?
Well, some things change, the schedule, the entire world, and some things don't, which is that Bob Baffert has the best contingent going into the Kentucky Derby, and in September he still probably will. He has 4, potentially 5 horses who could win this race, all of whom are probably better than everybody else. His big boys are Charlatan, who has won 2 allowance races by dazzling margins. Hasn't really run in a stakes race yet. I don't see that being a problem for him when he gets better company. There's another horse, name you'll be familiar with as a sports fan, Nadal. Nadal, named for the tennis star, won the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn Park. He will run back on what would have been Kentucky Derby Day, May 2nd, in the Arkansas Derby that has been rescheduled for May 2nd, and he has been fantastic. His Rebel win was a real hard-fought one, but against very good company, and he is a very classy animal. He has 2 others, Authentic and 1,000 Words, as in a picture's worth 1,000 words, both of whom have been very good on the West Coast, and he has one who hasn't even debuted yet, but is scheduled to debut soon, Cezanne, who cost $3.5 million as a yearling. And when you talk about, as we were earlier, horses who might benefit from the later date of the Derby, Cezanne might be one of them. Baffert could have 5 superstars in the gate for the Derby who are all better than everybody else.
At B. Abrams Voice, give him a follow on Twitter. Barry Abrams joining us here on Heartland Sports Live, host and producer of the In the Gate podcast. Barry, it's always great catching up with you. Appreciate the insight concerning everything going on. And now we have to wait a few extra months for what Kentucky considers their Super Bowl, the Kentucky Derby, coming up later this year, and look forward to it. And maybe we'll try to get you back on before that race happens.
Let's all be safe and well, and we'll do that for sure.
Thanks, Barry. Barry Abrams, host and producer of the In the Gate podcast. Once again, give him a follow on Twitter at B. Abrams Voice. I'm Trevor Rice. This is Heartland Sports Live. I'm Mike Matheson. Joining me coming up next, we're going to talk about the suspensions of the KHSAA girls and boys basketball tournaments. We'll talk E-Town's game in that girls Sweet 16 matchup as well. That and more as Mike Matheson will join me on the phone line next. It's Heartland Sports Live, 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM, and we are live streaming this afternoon with ESPN Radio 1061.com. And welcome back into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM. Once again, we are live streaming with ESPN Radio 1061.com. You can always go back and listen to every show. We get them uploaded on the Apple Podcast link that I have on my Twitter account at Radio Trevor Rice. And speaking of people who are also on Twitter, Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise Sports Team joining me here on Heartland Sports Live. At Matheson Mike, give him a follow on there. As Mike, we have not much to talk about in the sports world other than to kind of reflect on things that happened. E-Town dropped their opening round matchup in the girls' Sweet 16 tournament, and then we find out that would the second half of that tournament would pretty much be suspended. Boys Sweet 16 suspended indefinitely, and now we're just kind of wondering what could have been, I guess, especially for the boys' side. We didn't even get to see them play.
Well, especially the boys are playing the only undefeated team in the state, Ashland Blazers, which obviously has a steep history in the Sweet 16, and that was a game everybody was looking forward to. I mean, that was a game, to see into the state tournament last year undefeated, and now Ashland Blazers did, and E-Town was coming off winning the 5th region tournament, playing very good basketball, and it was going to be a very, very intriguing matchup because both teams are guard-heavy, guard-oriented. Ashland Blazers loves to shoot the three. E-Town loves to be running transition. It would have been a great game to watch.
No, you're right about that. Let's go back. I mean, we talked about the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament last week. Let's talk a little bit with you now during this segment as you got to listen into some of our games. That you were there for a couple, I do believe, as well, for the games. Just overall, how would you rate this year's Boys 5th Region Basketball Tournament? We had a couple of good matchups, a couple of blowouts. Pretty much what we expected, right?
Well, yeah, everyone was looking forward to, the second E-Town-LaRue game. How was that going to go? And obviously, once E-Town made those 6 threes in the second quarter, the game was pretty much over. But then everybody wanted to see the John Bardstown game and what would happen. Can John, and Bardstown played good, played well. John couldn't quite match it, and Bardstown picked up the dub. And obviously just a terrible end for the John Arden season. But dude, that's sports. Like I wrote a little bit later, at some point in time, there's like 70-something basketball teams in the state of Kentucky. One finishes their season with a win. Obviously, that's different right now this year. So, John just didn't have it when they needed to have it, and Bardstown played better than they did. And then the next night, I listened to you guys for the E-Town-Bardstown game, and it was just a great basketball game. J.J. Traynor doing his stuff, and Jaquia Stewart doing his stuff, and Miles and Cam. I mean, it was just a great high school basketball game, what I listened to, in a great atmosphere, because that place was loud.
I thought Zach put it well concerning that Bardstown-E-Town matchup, in which the first half Bardstown played well, Unfortunately, they didn't extend their lead as much as probably they should have. E-Town only 1 3-pointer there in that first half. And when you let them hang around and they start to eventually drain some threes like Jaquias Franklin did, who took over that third quarter, you kind of risk losing a ball game, right?
Well, yeah, everyone knows. The old adage is you can't let bad teams hang around because you give them confidence. Well, the same is true. If you have a chance to step on the throat and the neck of good teams, you need to step on them as much as you can. Now, E-Town proved in the second John game, they came back from a 20-something, 7-something point deficit, 20-something point deficit to lead late in the game, and actually, and so E-Town's proven they can come back from a large deficit. Obviously, that time of year, you don't want to be in a large deficit. And I think E-Town just from what I listened to you guys, I thought E-Town did a great job of just hanging around in the first half, while I thought Bardstown got the better of them. And then, as you know, with that E-Town team, man, once they get going and led by the defensive end, they did a nice job defensively against Bardstown, specifically in the third quarter. Then they start doing those things, and Jaquias, great players take over, and that's what Jaquias did in the third quarter.
You and I both agreed that Cindy Clark on the girls' side for the 5th Region tournament was definitely the player of the tournament for each of us. And then I think on the boys' side, I don't know about you. I think you may go this way. I thought Jaquias Franklin, especially in the second half of that LaRue game and then the third quarter of the Bardstown matchup, I would put him as the player of the tournament this year just for the fact that when he got going, he wasn't missing shots when it counted most, and he helped his team to not only get leads but also extend them.
Yeah, I'll go with Jaquias first and then Sid second. Jaquias proved he's a special player, and he's proved he's a really, really, really good player, and he proved that he's going to go D1 because he has that intangible. I think he's learned a lot from his teammates. And he's also learned throughout the season, when do I kind of need to take over? That's not an easy thing to learn for good players. And I think as the season went along, he learned more and more and more about himself. He learned more and more about his team, even though they've been together since they were in 4th and 5th grade. But I think Jaquias really learned, okay, let me pick my spots when I can take over. Let me pick my spots when it looks like I should take a three, but I won't. And then let me pick my spots when I'm going to dribble drive and go to the hole with a floater and go for a layup, or dish it to Miles, or dish it back out to Kaya or Cam Sherrard or Camden Williams or Jacob Moberly for three, or Peanut, or Londre Murphy. I think Jaquias I saw his basketball IQ rise as the season went along, and I just thought he did a tremendous job down the stretch for E-Town in the second quarter against LaRue. He just sparked that run, and then in the second half, when they started playing, for lack of a better term, four corners, which it wasn't true four corners, but they played slow ball, made LaRue come out and guard them. Jaquias just drove and dished, and it was the way he played was just brilliant stuff. Now for Sid, 18 rebounds, 23 rebounds, another however many thousand. She just proved how important rebounding is in girls basketball, because E-Town got hammered last year by Bethlehem on the boards, and they lost the game, and it wasn't close. And this year, Sid didn't care if she ever scored a point. She pretty much told me that. I know what my job is. My job is to get rebounds, and when they give me the ball, my job is to finish. And so she didn't care if she didn't care if she scored. All she wanted to do is grab rebounds. She had I think she had in the last two games, 12 points, 12 blocks. And,
just freak numbers.
Well, it was 41. It was 41 rebounds, 12 blocks, and 12 points in the last two games against Bardstown and Bethlehem. Because obviously you're not going to count the Hart County game. So 41 rebounds, 12 assists, 12 points. 12 blocks, 12 points. Those are insane numbers. And you need a Sydney Clark on your team in a lot of different ways. But the first way you need Sydney Clark on your team is because of her selflessness. She doesn't care that she gets points. She knows what her job is. She doesn't want to be in the limelight. She knows what her responsibility is. She knows what her role is. And just like when she played volleyball, she knows what to do. And you need that person who just doesn't care if they ever score. All they want to do is what's best for the team. And if you don't have people like that on your team, it's hard to win. And, obviously Ellie Taylor was a championship game MVP. Whitney Hay played outstanding basketball. Kayla Freeman is sick with what she does. Her hands, some of her dimes were just disgustingly good. You really needed Sid to take care of the glass against Katrina Brown for Bardstown, and then against Livers Bryant and Ella Thompson against Bethlehem.
Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Mike, let's go ahead and look at what could have been for this Sweet 16 boys basketball tournament. You're pretty close with a lot of the area athletes. You talk to the coaches quite a bit. Have you had a chance to talk with James Hare and the seniors, in particular Miles Fields, concerning the Sweet 16 tournament?
No, Matt Tyson did the story about the postponement. He talked to Coach Hare, talked to Miles Fields, and it's obviously, like I wrote the other day in this column, this is unprecedented. They just, someone else is putting the end to your season, and they all understand why. Obviously they're sad about it, and it's heartbreaking because this Sweet 16 boys tournament was as open as any boys Sweet 16 tournament in recent memory. Any. And if you go to the girls, the quote-unquote prohibitive favorite got beat in the last game that the tournament played. South Laurel beat Sacred Heart. So there you had the prohibitive favorite out of the tournament. So you had the boys and girls Sweet 16s both like this wide open toss a coin, see where it lands, and see who wins. I think that's the other heartbreaking part for at least the E-Town boys, is the fact that there was no. Obviously, Male's really good. The Ashland Blazers undefeated. There's some great basketball teams, but it was going to be a great tournament. It was just going to be a great high school basketball tournament because you didn't have, the team that everyone thought was going to win. No one knew who was going to win. Everyone had their ideas, but there was no, And if E-Town plays like they're capable of, which we saw a lot. You and I both saw a lot. You and I saw E-Town play some brilliant basketball. We saw them play not so brilliant basketball. But if they're on their game, they're incredibly hard out because they play on-the-ball defense as good as anybody in the state. They can get going with threes. They are incredibly unselfish, and they know how to find the open guy. So that's, I ache for the E-Town boys because they don't get to play, along with the other 15 teams that don't get to play, along with the other girls teams that don't get to finish. But what really hurts is the fact that the boys' tournament was literally anybody's game, and that's what was going to make it so special.
Yeah, if they are hitting their shots, going back to what you were just saying, E-Town boys basketball, if they are hitting their shots, in particular the three ball, I don't see many teams in the state, one, being able to keep up with them on the scoreboard, and two, have a chance of winning. I think you and I can both agree on that.
I agree with you, but that's why the Ashland Blazer game was so intriguing, because Ashland Blazer plays 5 out and shoots threes, gets it and go and shoots threes. That's what they love to do. They love to shoot threes. That's what made that game so incredibly intriguing on my end, because they were incredibly similar, both guard oriented, both like to get it and go, both like to shoot. It was just I think it could have been that game could have been a magical high school basketball game. Hopefully we get to see it. I know that's a really hard hopefully right now, but that game was going to be I think was going to be incredibly special one way or the other.
Yeah, and plus you look at it, it's going to be a team in Ashland Blazer who, if we don't play this tournament, would be is it only a second team? How many teams have finished undefeated in a season? It's kind of a weird situation because typically you include all the games from the boys Sweet 16 tournament, but if there's no games to be played, it would still be the same result, right? You still have an undefeated season.
Well, yeah, you can't take away their undefeated season. Obviously, they're still 4 games away from winning a state title, but you still cannot deny them an undefeated season because the season, they didn't stop their own season short. It's because of this pandemic and the the COVID-19. So, yeah, it's still an undefeated season. It's not an undefeated state championship season, but it's still an undefeated season.
Yeah, definitely. Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Who are you looking at? I know that you guys are going to be putting out your results on players and all of that nature coming up in one of the upcoming editions of your newspaper. But just give me a brief list of players who impressed you on the. Let's talk boys' side. We'll bring you back for one more segment talking about the girls in the next one. But on the boys' side, who stood out to you in the area this year?
Well, I'm really impressed with Zacchaeus because, like I told you, I just thought I personally, and look, I'm not in the gym with them every day. I just go by what I see every time I watch them play, and I really saw him improve as a leader on the court, and I saw him improve in learning how to pick his times when to do the right thing. I just thought he improved there tremendously. As much as E-Town hated the fact that Cam Sherrard was hurt for 17 games, and missed one because of being sick, I thought Kaya Sherrard was brilliant. I thought Camden Williams came off the bench early in the season and then played some great stuff. Obviously, Peanut's a really good player. Miles Fields is really overlooked on that team because at 6'1", whatever he is, he's got to deal with guys like Mark Good or Warner Bryan or Preston Murrell or Alex Matthews. You know, he's got to deal with those guys, and that's not an easy task to do. And he did it incredibly well throughout the season. Alex Matthews, let me tell you something about Alex Matthews. You know, last year he was 8 for 20 from three, right? 40%. This year he was 41 for 100. So he took 80 more threes, and he improved his percentage by 1. That tells you how much he spent taking shots over the summer. His free throw percentage improved by about 20 points, by about 20 percentage points. His free throw shooting improved drastically. That tells you how much time he put in. And if you want to find someone who, obviously, like a lot of kids that puts in the time, you just look at Alex's numbers, and they tell you what he did over the summer. And let's face it, when Alex Matthews wanted to take over a game, he took over a game because he's just big and he's strong. He'd go to the hole, and he's hard to stop. He's just really, really hard to stop. You look at Nasir Johnson at North. You know, North locks and Ashton Campbell sometime throughout the year, and then Nasir took over, and Nasir can flat play the game. And you could see what Nasir did over the summer to get better, and it was shown on the court. It was shown. You know, a central, Gavin George was playing out of position the entire season. The entire season, Gavin George is not a point guard, but he had to play point guard because he had to play point guard, and I thought he did a masterful job throughout the year just getting better and better and better. But he proved that he's a selfless team guy, because if he really wanted to be that guy, coach, I'm not playing point because that's not my job, but it was best for the team, so he did it. You look at LaRue County, you get the 6'7", big and tall collection with Mark Good and Warner Bryan. You know, Warner Bryan's going to Asbury, Mark Good's going to Western Kentucky to play football, and you see why. Now, next year, obviously, LaRue County loses 2 6'7" kids, along with Chase Childress, and so you got to revamp your team. But, that just shows how good basketball is in the area and how different basketball is in the area. And let's face it, look who John loses. Alex, Trayvon, Preston, they lose, I think, 6 of their top 9 scorers, but including their top 3. So don't think those John kids won't have a massive chip on their shoulder over the summer, whenever that is, because everyone's going to think they're not going to be as good because of who they lost, right?
Yep.
And everyone's going to look at who's returning for E-Town, because they've got a ton of talent returning. So you got Zacchaeus and Alex. Trayvon Harris is as good an offensive rebounder as anybody. Can get to the hole as good as anybody. And it's going to be very interesting to see where he lands. It's going to see where he winds up, to see where Alex winds up, to see where Preston Murrell winds up. It's just going to be interesting to see where those guys go to play their next level of ball.
He's Mike Matheson of News Enterprise. We're going to keep him around and talk girls basketball coming up next here on Heartland Sports Live, 106.1 ESPN Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM. We are live streaming once again with ESPN Radio 1061.com. I have Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise joining me right now, and we've been talking boys and girls 5th Region basketball. We talked to the boys' side, including he gave some highlights on who he really was impressed with this season towards the end of segment number 2. So you'll be able to check that out tomorrow when this show is uploaded on the Apple Podcast link. So I will share that and tag you as well, Mike, tomorrow. Let's talk the girls' side, as it was E-Town winning the 5th Region girls basketball tournament this year, defeating in a rematch against Bethlehem. And basically it was they reversed roles from a year ago, where it was E-Town with, and we were talking about it there in segment 2, Sydney Clark, who was just a rebounding machine, helping E-Town to win. They would advance to the girls' Sweet 16 tournament, where they would lose to Bullitt East. And so let's talk about this E-Town team real quick, Mike, because obviously this is a group of girls that Donnie Sweeney is going to remember, a group of girls that had to face some adversity this season, whether it be injury, players leaving the team and such. Just kind of an interesting year for E-Town Lady Panthers basketball. Yeah,
incredibly interesting year, considering they lost Kiera Dornan to an ACL like last summer, so they knew she was out. And then, Presley Payne went out with an ACL between volleyball and basketball. And then Jada Porter, got hurt, dislocated her knee in the 5th Region volleyball tournament. So there's 3 players down. So you have to kind of revamp yourself. And then one of the players quits the team. So then you have to revamp yourself again. All the while, then Whitney Hay missed 8-ish games with an ankle injury. Sydney Clark missed 6 weeks with a knee injury. And let's face it, every team must go through some sort of adversity throughout the year. Some teams get hit harder with others, but everyone needs to remember the other team that's trying to play you, they don't feel sorry for you. So you got to figure out a way to keep it going. Donnie did that. The girls did that. Whitney Hay. Plus, the one thing E-Town has, they have 3 Division I athletes on their roster. Whitney Hay is going to Belmont. Ellie Taylor's going to Northern. And Sydney Clark, at some point in time, some Division I volleyball program should pick her up, because she's 6 foot and good and can make every team better. And then that's not even counting what Kayla Freeman brings to the party. So you just watched every player on that team kind of take their turn, just kind of carrying them. Obviously, with Whitney carrying most load once she got back. But what's interesting to me about the Bethlehem game was the defensive matchup. Because Bethlehem took Livers Bryant and put her on Witt, which I thought was a very good defensive strategy by coach. Okay? But Bethlehem's problem is they had nobody, and I mean nobody, that could deal with Kayla Freeman. They couldn't stop Kayla from penetrating. They couldn't stop Kayla from dishing. They couldn't stop, for the most part, Kayla from giving it up. And then Donnie told me at one point in time during the game, Kayla came to him and said, I need to spend too much energy guarding Hodges. You need to put Ellie on the point. So Donnie says, okay. So he put Kayla at the 2, Whitney at the 3, and Ellie now plays the point. And Bethlehem didn't have anybody even guard Ellie, because it was Ellie, driving dish, Ellie, it was just, and so at some point in time, E-Town's guards just really took advantage of Bethlehem and won the game, along with Sydney Clark getting, a handful of points, getting 18 rebounds, and I think 6 block shots. And so when you have players like Kayla Freeman come to you and say, by the way, I'm expending a lot of energy on defense, making sure Hodges doesn't get anything clean, you need to put someone else at point right now so I can do a better job defensively. Well, that's what every team needs, right? Kayla wasn't proud enough to say, by the way, I can do this all by myself, because if she's working that hard defensively, that means she's got to give up a little bit offensively. So, okay, Ellie take over. Ellie's a point guard. Spent her whole career as a point guard. Now she's not going to play point guard next year at Northern. She's probably going to play the 2, but play point guard. And then when Ellie gets a little bit tired, put Whit at the point. When you put Whitney at the point, that means Livers Bryant at 6'1" is no longer next to the rim. And that's what I found fascinating about that game. And then, E-Town made a run. Whit got in foul trouble. Sid got in foul trouble. Bethlehem made a run because that's what happens in basketball, but E-Town never panicked. Get the ball to Kara, get Witt back in the game in the fourth quarter, get Sid back in the game in the fourth quarter. Let's let the seventh grader come in and do some nice things. Let Rikia Cormier come in and do some really nice things on the board. Kinsley Frank do some good stuff, and let's just take care of business. And that's what they did.
Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. You're right. That's exactly what they did. And you were talking about Ellie Taylor. I thought she really elevated her play from last year's 5th Region Girls Basketball Tournament. She embraced her role, and I think Kara Freeman really helped out with that situation this season. This year, though, in the girls' 5th Region Tournament, she was making some big shots, and she was showing a lot more emotion this year than she did last.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, obviously she transferred from Bethlehem. Ellie transferred from Bethlehem after her sophomore year, so I'm sure that was a little bit personal because they beat them last year, and so I'm sure that was personal. This year was personal, and I just think she told me, I asked her after the game if she could put into words what the game meant to her. She said, "No, I really can't. I really can't. It's just really special of what just happened." She became a different player once, because I did a feature on her early, kind of middle of the season, about her leaving the 1 and playing the 2 guard, and how she had to mentally wrap her head around that, because that's not an easy thing to do. And once she kind of got all in, she was all in, because she saw the floor now from different angles that she's ever seen the floor before. Instead of only seeing the floor from the point guard position, she got to see the floor from the 2, which is both wings. She also got to see the floor from the corners, which gives you different driving angles that she's never really seen before because she always played the point. And I think it's made her a better player because she's so quick, can use either hand, can drive with either hand, can pass with either hand. Plus, she became an 80% free throw shooter. She raised her free throw shooting percentage by a ton, and she said that was mostly confidence, just believing in herself that she could do those things. She took some really important threes in the Bardstown game and the Bethlehem game and made them. You're right, and she was the whole different player. And I think just like Witt and just like Kendall Wingler at Meade County, I think Ellie is just going to flourish on the next level.
I would not be surprised if that is the case. As we look now at that E-Town matchup against Bullitt East, they have a lead at the end of the first quarter. Then the second period rolled around. What happened for that club?
Bullitt East played really well. Here's the thing that people forget about. The other team wants to win too, right? And when you go to the Sweet 16, for the most part, you're playing some really, really, really good basketball team. Bullitt East is a really good basketball team that's very well coached. And Lexi Taylor, their best player, is going to Georgetown College. She can flat play. They have great players around her. And Bullitt East, imposed their defensive game plan on E-Town, specifically in the second quarter. His goal, the coach said in the press conference, was to make sure E-Town never got an offensive rebound, never got second chance points, never had the opportunity to get second chance points. And so in order to do that, they also played much tougher defense, I think, than Bardstown and Bethlehem did. Maybe because they can, but their defensive game was something E-Town hadn't seen in a while. And after E-Town did their thing in the first quarter, Harry scored late in the quarter to make it 14-8. E-Town didn't score again did not score in the second quarter until there was 30 seconds to go. Bullitt East held the scores for 7.5 minutes. And Bullitt East played really good defense. They kept E-Town from transitioning. They kept them from getting fast break points. They kept them from getting second chance points. And they kept them really at bay offensively the entire second quarter until Kayra hit a 3, then hit a 2, almost as a buzzer went off for their 5 points. But E-Town really had a hard time in the third quarter doing that. They played better defensively and offensively in the third quarter, but it wasn't until the early fourth quarter surge that it actually became a game. But let's face it, by then, you have spent so much energy trying to dig out of that hole. It's hard to keep the energy going, especially against very good basketball teams who know how to take care of the basketball, and that's what Bullitt East was.
Did you have a chance to talk to any of the girls afterwards to kind of get their thoughts on the game?
Well, let's see. Sid, Ellie, and Kayra were in the press conference. Sid, Ellie, and Kayra were in the press conference afterwards, and it Kara talked about how they played like much more physical defense than what she's used to, because they had no problem getting on her. They had no problem bumping her. They had no problem doing those things. And Ellie pretty much said the same thing, how E-Town's usual driving lanes were not there against Bullitt East. And they did and then also Bullitt East brings a 6'5" sophomore off the bench, Gracie Merkel, and she's hard to handle. She's a very big girl, good hands, soft hands, can block shots, play defense, and grab rebounds. And I don't think Sydney went up against anybody 6'5" this season when she was playing. And that's so. Bullitt East just played outstanding basketball. And then when E-Town made their run early in the fourth quarter and got it to within, I believe, 3, Bullitt East, again, like good teams do, they didn't panic. They ran their offense. They got a 3 when they needed it from Lexi Taylor or somebody else. They went to the line when they needed it, because I think Lexi Taylor was, I believe, 14 or 15 from the line. So they went to the line when was needed. E-Town won the second half rebounding advantage, but it just wasn't enough. And so, E-Town's season came to an end. I talked to Whit later for a feature. I says, okay, would you rather play to lost or like the boys right now not play? And she goes, I would have much rather played at Rupp and lost than not being able to have a chance to play at all. And I'm 100% with her. Because obviously you want to win like everyone else, so that option is not even on the table. So would you rather play and what happened, or always wants to play? And she was 100% right. She and the E-Town girls, although they lost, their season came to an end by what happened on the court, unlike 10 other teams and all the 16 boys teams whose seasons may never get to be completed because of this.
Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. You mentioned, some of those teams who didn't get to play there in that opening round, teams being told that they won't get to play. They have to take the bus ride back home. And there was some girls who were in tears because they didn't get to play. Some of those being seniors. What is that like? I guess you may not even know this, but you get to interact with enough of these kids. What is that like for a high school senior, knowing that you're playing your final moments of your career and it's cut short because of everything that's going on around you?
Well, the hard part is that I really don't think, now I may be wrong on this, that the Sacred Heart or South Laurel team knew whoever won that game wasn't going to play again. In the meantime, the next game, which was Henderson County, and I can't remember the other team they're supposed to play, they're in Rupp Arena. They're getting ready, and they're being told, pack up and go home. Can you imagine that? You're in Rupp Arena. You have your sneakers laced, and you're ready to go on the court at some point in time in Rupp Arena for the Sweet 16, and the KHSA representative comes to you and says, I'm sorry, we're shutting down the tournament. You have to turn around and go home. I cannot imagine what those girls were going through. Now, I'm not saying it was any easier for the girls who were supposed to play that night, like Owensboro Catholic, George Rogers Clark, and the other two teams, but they had never left the house yet. So you had two girls basketball teams literally inside Rupp Arena being told, turn around and go home because we're shutting down the tournament for who knows how long. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine what those girls, specifically those seniors, were going through. I don't have a clue. Because something far out of their control has shut down the season. Now, like Whit said, if you lose, right?
Yep.
Because everyone knows in sports there's a winner and loser. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And you go forward. So at least there was a definitive end to E-Town's girls' season. Well, there's no definitive end to 10 girls' teams that are in the Sweet 16. And right now there's no definitive end to 16 boys' teams. Now, the end may come to where they just say, okay, we're sorry, but it's gone. So I'll give the KHSA credit, and Governor Bashir right now, they haven't gone that far yet. I'm not saying it's not imminent because I don't know what that means, but at least everyone has an opportunity and a hope that they're still going to play. I think that's that's a hard hope. My personal opinion, because the Indiana high school tournament just got shut down. Ohio high school tournament is still on indefinite suspension. As the West Virginia tournament is still on indefinite suspension. So that means with the old, so you're saying there's a chance. Well, yeah, there's a chance. But I cannot imagine those girls being told, I'm sorry, but your season is now indefinitely on suspension. At least the boys, and it sucks for the boys too, at least they had a week before they were getting ready to play. Now, it still sucks they can't play. It's just a little bit different for the boys. But I just can't imagine being those two girls teams in Rupp Arena being told right then and there, hi, turn around and go home. I can't imagine that heartbreak.
Real quick, Mike, give me the players that impressed you most here in Hardin County this season.
For the boys, Alex.
No, for the girls, the girls side.
Oh, for the girls. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do the boys. The girls. Obviously Whitney could flat play. I think she's going to play the 3 at Belmont. She's going to do great things. Ellie Taylor, I thought, improved her game immensely because she went from the 1 to the 2. She saw the court on a whole different angles, and her game improved drastically. Kayla Freeman is a handful, and everybody knows it. If she spends the summer, whenever that begins, working on her outside shot to where she becomes a little bit more lethal, so to speak, hitting the 3 and hitting the 15-foot jumper, she's going to be just impossible to guard. Sydney Clark is Sydney Clark, and you want Sydney Clark you want 1,000 Sydney Clarks on your team. You look at Addison Sutton. Addison Sutton finished 10th all time 3 points made in the history of Kentucky girls basketball. That's how she finished her career. That's brilliant. That's outstanding. And you got to feel bad for how it did Gregory. She finished her year by tearing up her knee being torn up in the game against Central. But you have to like what she did. John has some players coming up that I think Nikki's done a nice job. You look at Eton, North, Desiree Bryant, Ella Shearer. Desiree Bryant is going to be a handful too, and Ella Shearer can knock it down from anywhere. And LaRue has everybody coming back. LaRue has everybody. Coach James Lehman has every player coming back. So they're going to be instantly better next year because they get to spend all year. This was kind of their dress rehearsal like Eton boys were last year. They got a dress rehearsal year. And so now they learned a lot about themselves, and everybody's coming back. Obviously, your big question mark is, what's E-Town going to do? Point blank. You lose 4 of your 5 starters. You lose Whit, Ellie, Kara, and Whit, Ellie, Sydney, and Rakia. So you lose 4 of your 5 starters. Who's filling those roles? You also lose a handful of other seniors, but who is now? You got to replace 4 starters. That doesn't happen very often for the E-Town girls. So who's going to step in? Obviously, Lindsay Franklin is one. There's a good chance Liam Macy's another one. But who is going to step in and fill those roles, right?
Yeah.
That's a major question. That's a major question mark for the E-Town girls. And then you have Central Hardin. They return 4 of their 5. Emily Bryant graduates along with the other seniors, Jaden Andrews and Madeline Ditto. But Central returns the Lindsay twins and the Kendrick twins. So they fill in someone, and they have the majority of their bench to go back. Central's going to be a handful next year because Monica Lindsay saw a growth with her this year that was palpable, just like I saw with Jakia. And obviously a little bit different, but I just saw growth that was palpable by Monica this year as a scoring point guard for Central Hardin. I've seen enough basketball that you either have a point guard that runs the show or you have a scoring point guard, right? You have one of the two. Point guards that run the show but also score, and then you have point guards who are scoring. Well, Monica Lindsay's a scoring point guard. She will also run the show, but she can drive and dish, hit the shot, that type of stuff. And I think Central's going to be a handful next year, considering they have 4 of their 5 starters back.
He's Mike Matheson of the News Enterprise. Real quick, Mike, how can people follow you guys?
We are at the NE Sports right now. We are in the process of publishing all our baseball and softball previews that were already written before all this happened. So we're just we're getting that in. We still hope that there will be a spring season to come. So we have each team a day. There's a school per day that's going in to the thing, and so you can follow us at the NE Sports. And we're just trying to get through this like everyone else, man. This is just an unprecedented time in our lives, and we hope that people stay safe and be safe, be smart, and do what everyone tells you to do. Don't be morons.
Yeah, most definitely. Those are words that don't be morons. That's what we're all going to say. Be smart about what you're doing. Mike Matheson there. Mike, thank you for your time.
Trevor, it was a pleasure. Thank you, buddy.
This is Heartland Sports Live. Thank you so much to Mike here, Barry Abrams in segment 1, and you for joining us here this afternoon. We'll come back with you next Monday, 5 until 6. It's Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio.